Ladies and gentlemen, this Gaming Silicon video, we're going to be talking about graphics cards because it's been a few days now since we've had an update and a couple of events have transpired within that time. We're going to be taking things a bit of a different direction from normal. Normally we do things alphabetically, so it's AMD then Nvidia, but we're going to start out with Nvidia this time and then AMD, simply because the Nvidia news is a lot shorter, so it makes sense, at least in my opinion, to get that out of the way first. Now, the news concerns the GTX 1060 or potentially the 1060 Ti. We're not quite certain yet, and we'll get more into why in just a second. So, a leaker by the name of Topway, he normally reports on various websites, including Chip Hell, and he did show us some of the first Pascal GP104 pictures just a while back. But, according to this leaker, we might be seeing 6 GB of memory for the GTX 1060/1060 Ti. Now, this means that the GP104-150 GPU is going to be using 6 GB of GDDR5 memory. Now, that's a little bit different from the 1070, which is the GP104-200 core, and that has 8 GB of GDDR5. So, from what supposedly the rumor is, originally Nvidia were thinking about going with just 4 GB, but supposedly because of Polaris, they decided to up that to 6 GB for the 1060. And obviously, we don't know yet how these cards are going to perform in the wild, but because both Nvidia and AMD are aiming a lot for virtual reality, and a lot of folks are going to be, let's face it, let's say for sake of argument, the 1060 or 1070 are really fast. Let's say they're as fast, roughly, as the 980 Ti. I could see, or maybe slightly slower, maybe 980 Ti speed. We'll go more into that when we're talking about that AMD news in a moment. I can see a lot of folks buying one of the cards and then later on upgrading to a second in SLI. And let's face it, if you've only got a 4 GB frame buffer, that's not going to be so appetizing. Now, of course, we do know about memory utilization with DirectX 12 is a lot better, but a lot of developers aren't using that yet. Hell, to be honest with you, DirectX 12 implementation in a lot of games has not been ideal anywho. But getting back to the more news itself, that means that the 6 GB variant is probably going to be utilising 192-bit memory bus, which would make a lot of sense. So, yeah, it's basically means that the 1080, 1070 and 1060, whether that's the Ti or regular variant, we don't know, are going to be using all GP104s. The difference is you've got the 400, 200 and then finally 150. The primary difference between memory, aside from the size, is also the speed. So the 1080 is going to be utilising GDDR5X. Obviously X being up to double the memory performance in terms of raw clock speed. Now let's move on to the AMD news. This concerns product positioning. Now, primarily this gives us an idea where the Polaris 10 is going to fall in performance, and potentially as well it gives us an idea about the 1070 and potentially the 1080. What it basically involves, or what it basically means, is that it looks like the R9 480 and 1070 are going to be offering mainstream performance. The difference is mainstream is going to be changed in terms of how it performs. In other words, let's say you have a game running right now on a mainstream card. So once again, let's take the R9 380 for sake of argument, and say it gets, I'm just pulling figures out my butt here, 40 frames per second at 1080p. Well, obviously the next generation of cards, because they've got 14nm and all this other stuff, AMD are looking to change that a lot because of virtual reality. I'll read out a quote from Roy Taylor from AMD. If you look at the total install base of the R9 290 or the GTX 970, or above the minimum specification required for VR, it's about 7.5 million units. But the issue is that if a publisher wants to sell a £40 or $50 virtual reality game, there's not a big enough market to justify that yet. We've got to prime the pumps, which means somebody has to start making and writing checks to big game publishers, or we've got to install the increase the install of the TAM, which is total addressable market. That's the reason Polaris is a big deal, is because I believe that it will be able to grow that total addressable market significantly. I don't think Nvidia are going to be able to do anything to increase the TAM, because according to everything we've seen about Pascal, it's a high-end part. I don't know what the price is going to be, but let's say it's as low as £500, $600, and as high as $1,000. That price range is not going to expand the total available market for virtual reality. We're going on record to say right now the Polaris will expand TAM, full stop. Now, just to clarify, total addressable market is basically the number of PCs which can run, theoretically, a virtual reality headset. So, for this video, we're just going to say Oculus Rift, but your mileage may vary. So, let's say you've got 100 PCs which can run the headset. That's not as good as 200, that's not as good as 300. So what AMD are basically telling us here is that they want to make it so that the virtual reality market, the cards which are the equivalent of the 290 or GTX 970 or above, are going to be a lot cheaper, which means that it's going to be a lot easier for folks to be able to afford them. So there are a couple of little caveats, because we don't know what Nvidia's cards are going to be priced at, and we also don't know what the, I guess you could say, the performance of the 1060 or the 1070 or their price range is going to be. So what this could potentially mean is that we could have a card, let's say, for sake of argument, the R9 480, which is probably going to be based on a form of, I'm going to assume, Polaris 10, which, from what the leaks are, is going to be like 36 to 40 compute units, and we can probably assume it's going to be faster than the current cards, let's say the R9 390 or 390X, but the pricing is going to be a lot cheaper, and it's also going to run a lot cooler, and it's going to have more memory and all of the other stuff that we probably come to expect. Now, how much faster that card is a big question mark. Theoretically, it could be quite a bit faster. It probably will also depend upon the application, and also drivers, software in general, for example, Windows, the API it's using, a whole bunch of stuff. And the reason I say that is because, for example, if you have an application that's bandwidth constrained, maybe Polaris will do better because, once again, you've got better memory compression. If you've got a title which was more, let's say, geometry restrained, once again, theoretically Polaris could potentially do better. It's all going to really depend on a whole bunch of different variables. For my mind, though, it's kind of a weird situation, because if AMD are going to be primarily focused on the mainstream market, that's probably a good thing for virtual reality folks. Now, obviously, if you've got a lot of money burning a hole in your pocket, and you want to go for that $800 card, which is, or £800 card, depending on your region and territory, then by all means, it looks like, once again, the Pascal lineup of cards is going to be the way forward for you. However, we don't know what the performance difference is going to be between the two manufacturers, for A. And for B, it's going to be really weird, because I think the GTX 1070 and 1080 are going to be really good buys for high-end folks, but I do wonder if there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be just holding on for those who are looking for the, I guess you could say, the bleeding edge cards, the HBM2 ones, which are going to be released supposedly Q1 next year. I mean, it's potentially possible you will get a lot of people who are going to do that, but I guess it depends what the performance jump is. For example, let's say you've got the 1080 right now, and it's going to cost £800, but it offers a 20% boost over the 980 Ti or the Titan. Are folks going to upgrade? Maybe. So I guess AMD's thinking with this is that they want to basically go to the mainstream sector because it's more profitable for them. Now, for the bleeding edge individuals, for those who want to run 4K or 5K gaming, then I can see how that would be a bit of a disappointment. But that's why Vega is probably going to be poised for next year. Unfortunately, all we can do is do some speculation, because we could start doing mathematics. Like, I can tell you, well, all you have to do is take 40 compute units of the Polaris architecture, assuming that is the maximum configuration. The rumours tell us it is, but rumours do not always equate to accuracy. So let's assume that, for sake of argument, it is. So you could just take 40, times it by 64, that gives you the total number of compute units, shaders. In fact, I'm going to do it right along with you here. So 40 times 64, because there are 64 stream processors per CU. So that gives us 2560. You times it by 2 because of just the technical reasons. That's all I'm going to say for this particular video. So that's 5,120 because each SP can do 2 operations per clock, essentially. And then you can times that by a fairly conservative clock. Let's say the Polaris architecture boosts by the rumored 1250, has a maximum boost around 1250 megahertz. Supposedly it's a little higher than that, but I'm going to be conservative because I like to be. So let's say that you're running at 1250. Hang on, clicking the wrong button, that doesn't help us at all. And that gives us a maximum single precision performance of about 6.4 T-flops, roughly. Obviously the mileage may vary. For example, let's say we were to do that math one more time. 40 times 64 times 2 and then we were to times that by 1300 instead, then you get about 6.65 T-flops of computing performance. Obviously, if it's only 1100 megahertz, then you can start adjusting accordingly. That's a lot of single precision performance, especially once again if the card is aimed at a competitive pricing. The reason I believe that it might be aimed at a competitive pricing, once again based upon rumours, and this is one's actually aimed at Sony. We have Sony, who are supposedly, with the PS4K/Neo, and we've gone into the technical analysis breakdown of the Neo several times over, so if you want more information on that, by all means check out one of my videos. But for that, supposedly you've got 36 CUs, 64 shaders per CU, which is 2304, and once again times 2 because 2 operations per thing, that's 4,608, and let's times that by the supposed clock speed, which I believe was 913 megahertz. It was around the 913 mark anyway. That's about 4.2, 4.3 T-flops of performance. And if rumours are to be believed, Sony are also packing in, of course, all the CPU and all the other bunch of crap that comes into a console. And I don't mean crap as in it's rubbish, I just mean, you know, load of stuff. And they're going to sell that for about $400. So even if you say that, obviously you've still got extra components on the GPU, for example, you've got the cooler, you've got the memory, you've got the various little metal components, including the various ports, but it could well be that the GPU itself is going to be pretty competitively priced. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. I've been a bit kind of itsy-bitsy actually on this one, sorry. Just come from the gym, to be honest, and I'm a bit low on, just low on energy, to be honest with you. I think I need more carbohydrates or something in me. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.